Are you on the market for a cheaper marimba? Or maybe even a beginning instrument for a younger student? Well, you're definitely in the right place because today we'll be taking a look at one of the cheaper value marimbas on the market right now. All of that and more coming up. Hello and welcome everybody to my YouTube channel. My name is Zachary Savinsky and today we will be taking a look at the Yamaha 3.5 Octave Padouk Marimba. To start off, I've actually had this marimba for about 7 years, which is actually pretty crazy to think about. My grandpa got it for me during my freshman year of high school, and I've of course had it ever since. So grandpa, if you're watching, thank you. But even though I've had this marimba for a long time, it does not mean it's perfect. And there's definitely a few things we need to talk about right here in this video, so let's get right into it. Starting with the price, this marimba costs $2,349.95 if you buy it from Steve Weiss. And what's included in that price is not just the marimba, but also a cover. Unfortunately though, I can't show you that cover because I got the board used and they didn't actually include the cover with it. But with my mom being as awesome as she is, she made a cover for it, so here it is. Now moving on to the bars, there are actually a couple of interesting things that we need to discuss, with the first one being the range. This board covers a range of 3.5 octaves, which covers the specific notes of the 3rd octave C to the 6th octave F. And to me, this is actually pretty interesting because compared to a 4 1/3 octave marimba, they took off notes from the bottom end of the marimba as well as the top end of the marimba. Because the range of a 4 1/3 octave marimba is the 3rd octave A to the 7th octave C. But expectedly, there are some downsides to having the range only be 3.5 octaves, as you're quite limited with the amount of repertoire you can actually play. Unless, of course, you want to play Yellow After the Rain for the rest of your life, which, I mean, the choice is yours on that one. Wouldn't be my particular choice, but you know, you be you. Next, we're going to talk about the width of the bars. And if you watched last week's video about the Adams 4 1/3 octave marimba, you'll know I talked at great length about the differences between graduated and non-graduated bars. And this is actually pretty great because last week we had an example of graduated bars, and now this week we have a great example of a non-graduated board. Now for a quick recap, not having a graduation in the bars means that they won't get bigger as you head down to the lower octave of the marimba. This means that all of your intervals will be smaller and it'll be harder to stay consistently accurate. But if you're a younger percussionist who's just starting out, this could actually be a good thing for you. And also a good tip to know if your marimba is graduated or not is to go to your octave grip and then see if the distance between the 3rd octave C and middle C perfectly lines up or not. And as you can see on the Yamaha board, the octave is actually around more of a 10th. Now moving on to the type of bars, Yamaha only offers this marimba with Padouk Bars, which is still a natural wood material, but is drastically cheaper than rosewood. But there are a couple of differences between Padouk and rosewood, with Padouk having a shorter resonance as well as having a little bit of a brighter sound, which I definitely forgot to mention in last week's video. In my experiences playing on Padouk though, I haven't really minded the brighter sound, nor do I really notice it when I'm playing. Except when I go to school the next day and remember how great rosewood is. Oh, how nice it would be to afford a rosewood marimba. But, back to Padouk, the final verdict on whether or not this marimba sounds good will actually be up to you guys, because here in a few minutes I'll actually be going through the sound test, so make sure you stick around for that. Also, I think it's worth mentioning that compared to the bars I've seen on other higher quality boards, I think these bars definitely look kind of thin on the side. This could hint at some durability issues, or the bars just aren't that well made. Obviously though, I've had this marimba for almost a decade and I haven't had any issues with that, so if this is a concern of yours, I wouldn't worry too much about it. Moving on to the frame, this is definitely where some of the weaknesses of the marimba start to show. As just looking at it, it's a very simple and minimalist design, but as a result, it looks super skinny and very cheaply made. This can also be reflected with the resonators, as they just rest in these little slits that they have in the frame. Now I know you're probably asking, but Zachary, don't all marimbas have this type of feature? And yes, you would be correct, voice inside my head, but on other nicer frames that I've seen, the slit is actually a little bit more compact, so that way the resonators fit in there more snugly. So that way it's harder for the resonators to move while they're resting on the frame. But out of everything on the frame, the biggest area of concern for me is the height adjustment system. To raise or lower the marimba, you have to loosen the knob on both sides and then pull the frame up manually. And when you do this, you have to make sure you're holding onto the top of the frame, because if you don't, it's gonna fall. This is because it's not pressurized or anything. It's not a gas lift, and it's definitely not like the crank system on the Voyager frame. So therefore, once you loosen it, it'll just fall if you don't hold it up. This is also where adjusting the height could become a two-person job. One person holding up the frame and the other person adjusting the knobs. Unless of course you're super confident in your abilities to do it by yourself. You definitely have a lot of trust, my friend. I also don't like how it's only dashes for the height adjustment system as opposed to others where it's dashes and numbers. Whether it be from 1 to 10 or if it's the actual height in inches. Because this just adds another step where you have to count how many dashes you're at, so that way you know you're at the right spot when you go to adjust it on the other end of the marimba. Alright, I think we've covered most everything for this portion of the video. Now it's time for the best part, the sound test. And for this first part of the sound test, I'll be playing some arpeggios up and down the keyboard, as well as some chromatic scales to finish it out. I'll also be playing all of these using a pair of mediums from the Innovative Percussion Soloist series. Now for this next portion of the sound test, I'll be rolling some simple 1-4-5-1 chord progressions, and I'll be using the same mallets as before. For this last part of the sound test, I'll be playing some basic marimba literature just so we can get an idea of how this marimba sounds playing actual music. What are your overall impressions of the marimba? What do you think of the sound test? Put your thoughts down in the comments. I really want to hear from you. I, for one, definitely think this marimba has some upsides as well as some downsides. For a board that's only 3.5 octaves with a cheap frame and no graduation in the bars, I think it's kind of expensive. Especially considering that for only $600 more, you could get a 4 1/3 octave marimba with graduated bars and a better frame. But that doesn't mean the marimba isn't for you. There's definitely some advantages, especially if you're on the younger side and you're just learning how to play marimba. And hey, look at me. This marimba pretty much got me into college. So there you have it. My review of the Yamaha 3.5 Octave Padouk Marimba. As always, I hope you enjoyed this video and got something out of this review. And hey, if you want to see more content like this, make sure you subscribe and hit that like button. It really helps me out. But until next time, thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a great week, and I'll see you in the next video.